Good morning, everybody. In 2017, I had the privilege of traveling in France on a battlefield tour. I was with my choir, my Vancouver choir, the Vancouver Welshmen's Choir, and we were singing at sites where Canadians had distinguished themselves in both World War I and II, and such as Juno Beach and Dieppe, but most importantly, something I will never forget is singing songs of remembrance at Vimy Ridge. I'm sure some of you have been to Vimy Ridge, but it is an absolutely stunning memorial to Canada and to Canada's contribution in the First World War. And it memorializes the names of many soldiers for whom there is no known grave. And it is, if you've been there, it affects you, and you'll never forget the experience. And so when I came back that summer of 2017, I saw this book, Remembered in Bronze and Stone, Alan's book. I saw it at the pharmacy in James Bay. I bought a copy, and boy, I came to realize the significance of World War I on the towns and villages. I mean, I knew this, but you know, you need to be reminded of these things. But the effect of World War I on the towns and villages and cities across our country in the 1920s, you know, people were coping with great sorrow, and the need to recognize and memorialize the boys from their town and the young women who served overseas in the war. And so I later went to a lecture that Alan gave based on his book, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I thought this Remembrance Week in November 2021, it would be nice if Alan could come and speak to us about his work and about some of the sculptures that we're going to listen to now. So Alan, over to you.
Well, thank you, David, and thank you all for this invitation. I should begin by saying, I'll use a word that birders often use, lifer, meaning the sighting of a bird that they'd never seen before. In at least two ways, this presentation of mine is a lifer. First of all, I've done numerous PowerPoint presentations, but never one this way, not a virtual remote one. I've always in the past done them in person. And in another way, it's a lifer too. As I mentioned, I've spoken on this subject numerous times, but never with a focus anything like this, namely on the sculpture of war. Typically, my talks have concentrated on the fallen, on people who fought and died, and who, in some cases, as David mentions, have no known grave. The exact number at one point of the people remembered on the Vimy Monument is 11,285. 11,285 soldiers without a known grave. This is the cover of my book, now 5 years old, my first book. And I should say that this book has been seen in different ways. It's, of course, history, war history. Some people keep copies of this book in their car, I've learned, because in their travels, they want to see some of the monuments that I describe and speak about in the book. Jan, my wife, and I have traveled across the country twice, and in addition, made several regional trips to see as many soldiers in bronze and stone as we can manage to see. And fortunately, I can now claim that we've seen a big majority of the entire lot. There are 400 some war memorials in the country featuring a statue, a figure of a person. Only about half of those, or a little more than half, are figures of soldiers. And this is the concentration of Remembered in Bronze and Stone. One person, though, saw this book differently. I was very surprised to see in the fall of 2016, You'll all remember Robert Amos, the arts writer for the Times of Colonists. He described this book, much to my surprise, as an art book. For him, the strong lure of the book was the presentation through image and description of the sculptures. So that's what I'm going to be focusing on today. And I want to start with a little side trip to Florence, Italy, or Firenze, if you prefer. I imagine, given your interest, many of you will have been to Florence and to have seen all the magnificent public statuary that is on display there. I'm looking right now at two figures on display since the mid-1800s, perhaps, one of Donatello, the other of Leonardo da Vinci at the Uffizi. Now, for me, my untutored eye, some of you may know better and will tell me so at the end of this talk, but to me, these are both exquisite sculptures. However, if you ask Google to provide information about Girolamo Turini, you will find practically nothing, and only a little bit more about Luigi Pampalone. These people are not famed, cherished, and celebrated sculptors, and yet looking at this work, to my eye, it is beautiful. Both of these were carved in Carrara marble. Here is one of hundreds of marble quarries in the northwest corner of Tuscany at Carrara, literally hundreds of them. Jen and I visited these a few years ago and found that there is still plenty of marble to be quarried, but very little of it is the stuff that was cherished by the great Italian sculptors of hundreds of years ago. That variety of Carrara marble is called Statuario, and Statuario is pretty much played out now. Most of the stone being quarried here is meant for industrial applications, countertops, floor tiles, and so on. So very little of it remains that would have been found suitable by Donatello, Bernini, or Michelangelo. The thing is that it is also found a home in Canada. This is just one of the little villages that perhaps David has in mind. This too was carved at some point in the early 1920s by an artisan, a carver from Tuscany, who doubtless had never seen a Canadian soldier, only images of them. Foxwarren happens to take stage first in my chapter dealing with the Italian figures that we find across the country. Nearly half of these figures are in Carrara marble, nearly half. This one is at Foxwarren, Manitoba, a tiny little village of approximately 200 people. And yet, if we consider the names on this monument, you'll see that there are 15 of them, if I remember my count. 15 young men, in some cases boys, who went off to war and never came home. 15 in a population of 200. And this is a particularly fine example of the best that a Canadian War Memorial can be. It lists the names of each of the fallen, the military unit in which they served, the date on which they died. Perhaps you'll notice that the first two names on this list are Baird, two brothers. It's very commonplace in traveling across the country, as Jan and I have done twice, as well as these regional trips, to find brothers named on a single war monument. I present this one because it is a typical Italian marble figure across the country. You'll see that this one hasn't been especially well cared for. It's crusted in lichen. It has a little bit of damage to the nose, which I'm sure was at the hand of a human rather than the weather. Notice the similarity between these two far-flung figures, one at Reston, Manitoba, and the other at Tatamagouche in Nova Scotia. They are the same figure. Not, of course, stamped out on an assembly line, but carved to the same model. In this case, we have two soldiers resting on arms reversed. And the one on the left in Reston, you'll see, is in poorer condition than is the one at Tatamagouche. Marble is a very soft stone, much softer than granite. And so we find that marble monuments have not fared all that well comparative to granite, or especially to bronze. These two are virtually the same, probably carved by a different artisan, but to the same specifications. In this case, a soldier resting on arms reversed. What would have happened is that a community would have selected this model from a catalog and paid to have it carved for the community. Now, why are there so many Italian marbles on our cenotaphs across the country? The answer is simple. They were cheaper than any other alternative. I've mentioned that marble, in fact, many of you will know this, is not a particularly hard stone. In fact, it's a soft stone. And while the figures we see at the Uffizi are outdoors, they're in very different climatic conditions than are the figures on our monuments in Canada. These two, one at Hamiota, Manitoba, the other at Colborne, Ontario, are damaged largely by nature. They are melting away. Not all marble is as hard, as durable as any other piece of marble. And these two are in very poor condition, again, at the hands of the Canadian climate, not a human hand. Here we see different kinds of damage. These figures, both in Ontario, Galt and Kintore, are quite close to each other. And when I have studied these, I've imagined that these have been victimized by a boy with a slingshot and a very good aim. In the case of the Galt figure, we have a very major injury between the eyes, the lower forehead, and in Kintore, we see that the left eye has been very severely damaged. Now, there is an unintended measure of verisimilitude in these figures, because many a young man went off to war only to find himself shot dead, perhaps by a sniper or an enemy infantryman. And there are, of course, many soldiers who went off to war with two eyes and came home with only one. So in a way, the damage done to these figures, perhaps by that 14-year-old boy with an excellent aim in slingshot, has added value unintended to the impact of these figures. Again, in Carrara marble. Not all the news is bad. Here's the lovely little prairie community of Arcola, Saskatchewan, which must be subject to some of the worst extremes of weather in the country. But you'll see that the figure on the right, the close-up, is beautiful. It is still in excellent condition, despite the extremes of climate that prevails in southern Saskatchewan. I dare to imagine that this figure is just about as undamaged as it would have been in the early 1920s when it wasn't unveiled. So not all Italian marble is equally sound, is equally strong, equally durable. I'm now going to set the Italians aside and speak briefly about the other artists, American and British. This is by a prominent American sculptor who happened to have been born in Scotland, J. Massey Rhind. This is the figure that he produced in bronze for the community of New Glasgow, Nova Scotia. It is, in my view, sublimely well detailed, very evocative of a battalion of piper, and it is just one of several produced in Nova Scotia by J. Massey Rhind. Nova Scotia, I'm happy, and I guess a little bit proud, because I'm a Nova Scotian native, to be able to tell you that in per capita terms, there is more war memorial statuary in that province than anywhere else in Canada. Some of you, perhaps all of you, will recognize this as a detail of figures on the National War Memorial in Ottawa. In the late 1920s, the federal government gave the commission of producing a National War Memorial to Vernon March. Now, unhappily for Vernon and indeed his family, he died very soon thereafter. But this was a very talented family. 5, or is it 6? I'm not remembering at the moment, brothers and 1 sister were all sculptors. And the surviving siblings carried on with the work to its completion in 1936, when it was dedicated by King George VI and Queen Elizabeth. Another example, our very own soldier in bronze at the cenotaph on the Legislative Grounds in Victoria. This one was produced by one of the siblings of Vernon March, namely Sidney March, who has quite a CV of his own in this country. Here is a detail of the old soldier on our cenotaph right here in Victoria, where I happen to be, along with hundreds of others yesterday. This is a rather unique figure in my view. In fact, I count it among my 10 favorite in the country. Often we see that the soldiers in the Canadian Expeditionary Force are depicted as young and handsome and beautiful. In this case, Sidney March decided to tell a different part of the truth, which is that not everyone who served as a soldier was a boy or a young man. This is an old soldier. He's weather beaten, but at the same time, he is still resolute in his duty, and he has every intention of carrying out his duty, even though by the standards of the day, this must have been a very old guy. I share in David's feelings about the National Vimy Memorial in France. I have made 2 trips to this monument. Sadly, the first one delivered me to a construction scene. The entire monument was under wraps. So these photographs were taken during my second expedition to Vimy. And the monument is every bit as striking, as beautiful, as moving as David has described. Here is a detail of 2 of the figures, 20 or more, on the monument. Very evocative. I find. Now, who was the artist who produced the Vimy monument after many years of intensive work? Well, of course, it was Walter Allward. Allward has two war memorial groupings in Canada, one at Peterborough and this one at Stratford, Ontario. Now, this is obviously not a representational depiction of a Canadian soldier. We are led to imagine that this depicts the victory of civilization, represented by the figure on the right, and barbarism, the one who's hiding his head on the left. The figures at Peterborough are every bit as allegorical, not representational, as we see in these ones. Excuse me. Here we have a man with a marvelous name, Coeur de Lion McCarthy, who perpetrated a wide range of war memorial statuary across the country. Coeur de Lion was one of perhaps 20 offspring of Hamilton McCarthy. And most of you will have seen the figure, the Robert Burns one in Beacon Hill Park by the putting green. That figure was produced by Coeur de Lion's father, Hamilton McCarthy. The significance here is that we have a beautiful soldier showing no wounds whatsoever, no damage at all, but he's dead and he's being ferried to heaven by an angel. There are numerous angels on the statuary that we find on our war memorials. And it's not by accident that that is the case. It was very important to many parents, to fathers and mothers, to believe that in fact their fallen son had found a place in heaven. So Coeur de Lion McCarthy was serving one sort of purpose in depicting this grouping, this pair, which he did for 3 CP stations in Canada, one in Montreal, one at Winnipeg, and the third in Vancouver. And in a very different vein, the same artist, Coeur de Lion McCarthy, who tells a truth here that is not often told on our war memorials. What was the business of the soldier? It was to kill the enemy. And at Trois-Rivières, we see that this McCarthy depicting a Canadian infantryman about to plunge his bayonet into the chest of an enemy soldier. A very different kind of truth, so told in this figure by Henri Hébert. This is at Yarmouth, Nova Scotia, and it is the only memorial figure that I have seen, and I'm certain that I would know if there were any others. This tells the truth about the Canadian soldier of the First World. They virtually all smoked. And here we see a mud besplattered infantryman heading back to a rear trench from a stretch of duty in the front lines. And what's he doing? Well, of course, he's enjoying a pleasant smoke. This too earns a ranking, in my view, of the 10 best in the country. Here's another one that tells the truth in a similar vein to the second Coeur de Lion McCarthy. Here we see an infantryman hiding in the shattered ruin of a building. And what do you see in his right hand? You see a grenade, a Mills bomb, which he is about to thrust into enemy ranks. The artist in this case was Frank Norbury, who had the advantage of knowing a little bit about what he was doing, because he had been a veteran, a Canadian veteran of the First World War. He was also a journalist, but a very accomplished sculptor on top of all of that. This is in a tiny community called Holden in northern Alberta. And to see this for the first time was for me very, very striking. Another truth of a different sort told by a Canadian sculptor. Now we come to George W. Hill, who was a very prolific sculptor in his early 60s, at the time that he was producing figures for war memorials across the country. And this one is truly fascinating for me, inasmuch as we have a soldier, again, an infantryman, a Canadian, and another angel. Now, in this case, the angel is not conveying anyone to heaven. She is pointing away. And we soon, on studying this figure, that she's not pointing away to a tavern, to a place where a soldier can find ease or food and drink. No, no, no. She's pointing the way to where the soldier can find the enemy and go about his business as a killing machine. Now, it's fascinating to me that this is an angel who has taken sides. This angel is on the side, the righteous and virtuous side of the Canadians at war. Fascinating too that German infantrymen wore a belt having a buckle bearing the words "Gott mit uns," God with us. So we are led to presume that it's a different angel who was counseling German soldiers as to how they should best go about their duty as infantrymen. Hill is easily the most flamboyant and grandiose of the major sculptors producing this work in the 1920s. There is George W. Hill in his earliest 60s at the time that he was producing these figures. And he has a wide array of them, mostly in Eastern Canada, in Quebec and the Maritimes. Here is his grouping at Sherbrooke in Quebec. Again, we have an angel presumably motivating these Canadian soldiers to do their best for king and country. Look how rhapsodic all three of the soldiers on the right are contemplating their angel. Then we have what I consider to be Hill's masterpiece. In front of the legislative building at Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island, where the Fathers of Confederation met shortly before 1867 to invent a new country. You'll see that Hill's name is emblazoned across the right base. These are stalwart, brave, completely unworried Canadian infantrymen. One of them can't even bother to go into action wearing a helmet. What does a Canadian need by way of a helmet? Well, in Hill's view, the Canadian soldier, absolutely intrepid and fearless, needed no assistance either from a helmet or indeed, in most cases, from an angel to do his business. Take another look at the base of this bronze, and you'll see in front of the feet of the helmetless soldier, excuse me again, a Pickelhaube German helmet. This reflects the view that the Canadians have already done great damage to the German enemy, and more damage is about to be done in the next chapter of this war. If it was fearlessness, bravado, unshakability that a community wanted for its figures on a cenotaph, they could do no better than George Hill. This is, some of you may know, a figure by Donatello, St. George. You can contemplate that for a moment. The composition. And then contemplate this. Now, I don't know, as a matter of fact, that Emmanuel Hahn was partly inspired by the figure of St. George that had been perpetrated in the 1400s by Donatello. But to me, the influence is obvious. On the left, we have the figure at Westville, Nova Scotia, a Canadian infantryman, a sergeant in this case, standing at a battlefield grave. This is the figure that caused all the trouble. I stumbled upon Westville whilst on a military history expedition in 2010, and I decided that I needed to know a lot more about Emmanuel Hahn, his work, and where I could find it. And that is what inspired the transcontinental and other journeys that ensued over the next few years. Two more shots of the figure by Hahn at Westville. Now you may notice that there's a contrast between what is depicted at Charlottetown by Hill and this figure at Westville by Emmanuel Hahn. Hahn is not a glorifier. Rather, like Wilfred Owen, my view is that Emmanuel Hahn's subject was not the glory of war, which it was for Hill, but the pity of war. This is a soldier standing at the battlefield grave of a fallen comrade. Two detailed shots of the Westville figure. For reasons that will come to delight before we're done, this is the only one of the war memorial sculptures perpetrated by Emmanuel Hahn on which he identifies himself. The only one. And here is Emmanuel Hahn himself, working on the next figure that I will show you. Tommy in greatcoat. And here it is at Lindsay, Ontario. Tommy in greatcoat. No glory here. No grandiosity. Plenty of contemplation and reflection. And I submit a good deal of grief. Again, we have a soldier represented as grieving over, one imagines, a lost comrade. One more to show you. This is a soldier going into action. Again, I postulate that the look on this soldier's face is very different from the ones we saw on the Hill figures in Charlottetown. What were the actual feelings of a soldier at going over the top to an officer's whistled signal? Was it joy, exultation, ambition, as Hill might have us believe, or was it something else entirely? But was it more like anxiety, fear, or outright terror? Interestingly, when Arthur Currie underwrote the costs of a war memorial at Saint-Lambert in Quebec, he decided that he wanted a figure that would reflect the true Canadian soldier of the First World War. This was the first at Summerside, and Curry wanted the same figure at Saint-Lambert across the river from Montreal, where he was serving as Chancellor of McGill University. These are the only two, the one at Summerside and the one at Saint-Lambert. I'm sorry, I realize I've got a mistake here. Forgive me. It should not say Han, Lindsay, Ontario. It should say Han, Saint-Lambert, Quebec. Saint-Lambert. The Westville figure was so cherished, not just by me, but many people of the day, that many communities, despite the cost, wanted a Han just like the one at Westville. Two were perpetrated in bronze, the one at Westville, and another at Cornwall, and the other 8 carved by the Thompson Monument Company to Han's specifications. They range all the way to our own British Columbia. This is the figure, the same one at Fernie, with a magnificent mountain backdrop. Now we come to the design for the Winnipeg cenotaph, which was commissioned in, I believe, the year 1922. There was a jury, a paneled jury of several specialists who contemplated 47 submissions for the Winnipeg cenotaph, and the jury conducted a blind competition. This was their unanimous, this is the maquette, of course. This was the winning design, apparently unanimously by all members of the jury, who didn't know whose work they were selecting. There were 47. And when it came to light that the chosen design was Han's, even the other, excuse that phone, the other competitors, 46 of them, generally agreed that this was the prize. And so the city of Winnipeg awarded the commission to Emmanuel Han. Then someone decided to, oh, excuse me, my phone is, see, this is one problem that never happens in a live presentation. Here, excuse me, I'm going to bury this in the toilet. There, again, my apologies. So an insurrection arose. So someone decided to investigate the name Han and did some research and found that Emmanuel Han had, in fact, yes, been born in Germany. He came with his very talented family to Canada at age 7. And he became a Canadian on the very first day that he was eligible to apply. And that was on his 21st birthday. He founded and was the first president of the Canadian Sculptors Society. Well, there arose a great furor. And the end result of that was that the naysayers won the battle. And Winnipeg pulled the commission away from Han and set new rules, namely that only artists born in Canada or in an allied nation could apply. So there was a second competition and a second award. This one went to a woman artist named Elizabeth Wynne Wood. She got the commission. Then it came to light on investigation that Elizabeth Wynne Wood had been trained by Emmanuel Han, and furthermore, by this time, was the spouse of Emmanuel Han. Again, a furor arose And again, the commission was canceled. And so in the result, what Winnipeggers gather around on Remembrance Day is a run-of-the-mill a column that is a tribute more than anything else of the hatred that lived in the hearts of Canadians toward the German enemy, notwithstanding, of course, that Hahn was a Canadian through and through. And here we have the two artists. On the right, Emmanuel Hahn, and on the left, Elizabeth Wynne Wood. Both of them rejected. And I'll now close with just one more thing. Remembered in Bronze and Stone is my first book. I have a brand new one published by Heritage House. It's in all the, as they say, all the better bookstores in town. I have to admit to you that there's not much sculpture in this book, but there's more than hockey. This book takes a fairly deep dive into the cultural, social, and political milieu in which the hockey heroes of this city went about their business in the years 1911 to 1926. So there you have it. Let's call it an end here.
Okay, I think we probably have some questions for you, Alan. So I'm going to ask anybody who has a question to unmute yourself.
I have a question about Dave Sproul.
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, Alan, where is the maquette for the proposed Winnipeg cenotaph?
To the best of my knowledge, it's in the hands of the family.
Okay,
Of
thank you.
Hahn's family. I'm not absolutely certain about that, but the family, particularly his daughter, well, the daughter of Hahn and Wynne Wood, Kennifer Brown, was very helpful in providing a documentation, images, and recollections of both artists.
Wonderful, thank you. Alan, I'm also wondering about, the fact that our monuments are very much in the open, whereas when you showed the ones in Italy, like they were up high and they were also sheltered by a building. And I'm just, wondering if something like that would contribute to the life expectancy of particularly a marble sculpture.
Well, for those of you who have been to Florence, you'll be aware that there's a great deal of marble statuary that is not covered, that is out in the open. And none of that open statuary that Jan and I saw a few years ago was in anything like the poor condition of some of the figures that I've shown you in this talk. None. So I have to imagine that typically in Firenze, the open marble statuary is subject neither to the extremes of climate that we have to endure in Canada, nor to perhaps 14-year-old boys with a good aim and a slingshot.
Okay. Does anyone else have a question for Alan?
I have a comment about Alan, and I just want to thank Alan and David for giving the focus on the Vimy Memorial, which is so beautiful. And I made a point of going there because my uncle died in the First World War and his name is on the memorial, and no one had been there. And I felt it was very important to go. And I saw it on a blue sky day, just shining at the top of that hill. It was remarkable, just remarkable. So thanks for that.
Linda, may I ask you for the name of your relative?
Yes, his name was George Matthew Fretwell, Fretwell.
Fretwell,
Yes,
sorry, spell it again.
Fretwell.
Well, one of the rewards for me in giving these talks is that I encounter people who do what you've just done. Give me the name of someone that I can have fun researching.
Well, it's very interesting. He appears in the University of Toronto book from that period of time. There's a war memorial book that they put out, and he's in that. And he was a medical student at the time, was a gunner. And of course, he was hit and no remains. So thus, he is on that memorial. And yeah, if you want to contact me for any reason, I'm happy to do that. And I don't know how we do that, Bev, you tell me.
Well, if Alan lets David know, I'll if he wants to, we'll get you guys in touch.
Sure, sounds good. Thank you.
Thanks, Linda.
Okay.
I'll call on Colleen Brown to thank our speaker. I mean, Charlene Brown, I'm sorry.
Oh, excuse me, Deb. I think my good buddy, Mike Wyeth, just put his hand up.
Oh, sorry, Mike, go ahead.
No problem. I wonder if the deterioration of some of the marbles is associated with acid rain, because acid rain would eat at marble much faster than most other stones. So I wonder if there's a connection with the North American spread. I don't know if that would apply to Manitoba and Alberta, though. So maybe it is pure weather. Just a speculation.
Well, you know, the interesting thing, Mike, is that if a region of the country had been especially badly treated by acid rain, you might imagine that all of the marbles in that region would be similarly affected, but they aren't.
Okay.
In fact, some of the worst examples I've shown you in this presentation are not at all far away from some of the best examples. And so I have concluded that one chunk of Statuario is not the same as another, not necessarily.
Just cheap stone.
Well, it was cheaper, yes, for a community to invest in Carrara marble than the other options. But I have seen again and again that nearby communities will have figures at opposite ends of this spectrum.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Could I make one comment, Bev? It's Trish.
Sure, yes, Trish.
Just, I have a comment and a question. First of all, my comment would be, thank you so much for what a wonderful presentation. It was just your commentary, your insights into the art. Have no hesitation about talking about sculpture. You're terrific. Also, the quality of your photographs. I have a question and two questions. One, have you seen the very moving sculpture at Saint-Julien in Belgium, the brooding soldier, that reminds me a lot of Vimy? Have you been to Saint-Julien?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I have. In fact, that was by an artist named Robert Clemesha, and there was a real debate among the movers and shakers at the time that the principal focus ought to have been put on that figure at Saint-Julien rather than anything else. Yes, I've seen it and admired it, and I have a string of images of it on my Flickr stream, along with so many other war memorial sculptures.
And one other one that I think is also evocative of Vimy is the cenotaph in Oak Bay. Would you have a comment on that for us?
Well, yes, I do, as a matter of fact. If only I can summon up the name. The figure in Oak Bay was produced by a student of none other than Emmanuel Hahn.
Well, we can see that genius there, right?
Yes, well, I would say so, yes. What
Interesting.
is his name? I'm sorry, I should have this at the tip of my tongue, but you know, at my age, the tongue gets slower, or something gets slower.
No, it was a wonderful talk. Thanks so much.
Thank you for saying so.
Okay, thanks everyone. And Charlene, would you like to thank Alan, please?
Yes, I think the others have conveyed it. I don't see a yellow square around my face. So I'm not the person being picked up here. Anyway, I think the others have conveyed very well our deep appreciation of this wonderful talk. I really enjoyed that. And I didn't realize there was going to be the information specifying about the sculptures and the attitudes of the different, that lent so much more meaning to these statues, and that some of us have seen and others haven't. And that was just great additional information about this. Some were going for evocation, others were going for truth and brutal truth. That was just really wonderful. I'm going to buy the book so I can get this right and absorb this information. Thank you so much, Mr. MacLeod.
Thank you.
And thank you, Charlene.